In 216 BCE, during the Second Punic War, the Battle of Cannae unfolded as a defining moment in the struggle between Carthage and the Roman Republic. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general, brought his army deep into Roman territory, seeking to weaken Rome's dominance by inciting rebellion among its allies. The Roman Senate, determined to crush Hannibal after earlier defeats at Trebia and Lake Trasimene, assembled an unprecedented force of approximately 86,000 soldiers, commanded jointly by consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Hannibal's force, though significantly outnumbered at around 50,000 to 56,000, was a well-trained and cohesive army composed of troops from across the Mediterranean. It included Libyan, Iberian, and Gallic infantry, as well as Numidian and Iberian cavalry renowned for their mobility and effectiveness. The Carthaginian army had been hardened by years of campaigning under Hannibal's leadership, making them disciplined and adaptable to his innovative tactics. Cannae represented a stark contrast in military philosophy. The Romans relied on sheer numbers and brute force, seeking to overpower the enemy with their massive infantry formations. Hannibal, in contrast, employed psychological and tactical mastery, crafting a plan to neutralize the Romans' numerical advantage and exploit their rigid command structure. The stakes were monumental. For Rome, the battle was an opportunity to reclaim control and deliver a decisive blow to Hannibal's campaign in Italy. For Hannibal, it was a chance to dismantle Roman hegemony and strike a fatal blow to the Republic's confidence and alliances. The clash at Cannae would ultimately demonstrate the devastating power of strategic brilliance against overwhelming odds. By the late 3rd century BCE, Rome and Carthage were locked in the Second Punic War, a conflict that would decide control of the Western Mediterranean. Carthage, a wealthy maritime power, had suffered a humiliating defeat in the First Punic War, losing Sicily and other key territories. Determined to restore Carthaginian dominance, Hannibal Barca, a brilliant general from a distinguished military family, led his forces from Iberia into Italy, an audacious move that defined his campaign. Hannibal's march over the Alps in 218 BCE stunned Rome and established his reputation as a master tactician. Once in Italy, he dealt Rome 2 staggering defeats, first at the river Trebia and later at Lake Trasimene, where he annihilated Roman forces through clever ambushes and unconventional tactics. These victories sent shockwaves through the Roman Republic, undermining its military confidence and exposing the vulnerability of its rigid command structures. In response, the Roman Senate mobilized unprecedented resources to confront Hannibal directly. They raised a massive consular army, combining Roman legions with allied forces to form one of the largest armies in their history. The decision to assemble such a force reflected not only Rome's desperation, but also its unshakable belief in numerical superiority as a decisive factor in war. Hannibal, however, sought more than mere battlefield victories. His strategy was aimed at breaking the Roman alliance system, persuading Rome's Italian allies to defect and destabilize the Republic from within. His occupation of southern Italy and seizure of supply hubs like Cannae was a calculated move to challenge Rome's ability to maintain its war effort and sustain its armies. By 216 BCE, both sides understood that the stakes at Cannae were existential. For Rome, the battle represented an opportunity to crush Hannibal and restore its authority over its allies. For Hannibal, it was the chance to deliver a decisive blow that could dismantle the Roman Republic and secure Carthaginian supremacy in the Mediterranean. The stage was set for a confrontation that would be remembered as one of history's most devastating and strategically significant battles. The forces at Cannae represented a dramatic imbalance in size and composition, underscoring the contrasting military philosophies of Carthage and Rome. The Roman army, assembled under consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, was one of the largest in the Republic's history. It numbered approximately 86,000 troops, consisting of Roman legions and allied contingents. This massive force was structured around the traditional Roman manipular formation, which emphasized dense infantry lines designed to overwhelm opponents through sheer force. Supporting the infantry were around 6,000 cavalry, a mix of Roman and allied horsemen, though they were poorly equipped to match the superior cavalry of Hannibal's forces. Hannibal's Carthaginian army, in contrast, was smaller, with estimates ranging between 50,000 and 56,000 men. However, it was a seasoned and highly diverse force, reflecting the vast reach of Carthage's influence. The core of Hannibal's infantry consisted of Libyans, Iberians, and Gauls, armed with a mix of long spears, short swords, and shields. This diversity extended to tactics and fighting styles, which Hannibal used to great effect in exploiting the rigid formations of his opponents. Carthaginian cavalry, numbering around 10,000, was a decisive factor in the battle. Hannibal's Numidian cavalry, known for their speed and agility, was unmatched in skirmishing and flanking maneuvers. Iberian and Gallic heavy cavalry provided additional strength, giving Hannibal dominance and mobility. This advantage allowed him to neutralize the Roman cavalry and turn the tide of the battle. Hannibal's leadership and strategic insight were the true unifying elements of his army. His ability to harness the strengths of such a diverse force and coordinate their efforts against a numerically superior opponent highlighted his brilliance as a commander. The contrast between the Roman reliance on sheer manpower and Hannibal's use of tactical ingenuity would define the outcome at Cannae. The Battle of Cannae stands as one of the most remarkable demonstrations of tactical ingenuity in military history. Hannibal Barca, facing a Roman army nearly twice the size of his own, crafted a strategy that capitalized on the rigidity of Roman formations and the strengths of his diverse forces. Hannibal arranged his troops in a deliberate crescent formation. At the center, he placed his weaker and less heavily armed Gaul and Iberian infantry, presenting an apparent vulnerability to the advancing Roman legions. On the flanks, Hannibal stationed his elite Libyan infantry, equipped with heavier armor and weapons. These forces, held in reserve, were key to his plan. Finally, Hannibal deployed his cavalry, including the highly mobile Numidian horsemen, on both wings, knowing their superior skill and speed could overwhelm the Roman cavalry. The Roman army, commanded by consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, relied on a straightforward plan of brute force. Their formation was compact, with dense ranks of infantry aimed at breaking through the Carthaginian center. Confident in their numerical superiority, the Romans advanced with their manipular system tightly packed, focusing their efforts on overwhelming the perceived weak point in Hannibal's line. As the Romans pressed into the Carthaginian center, Hannibal executed his plan. The crescent formation gave ground gradually, drawing the Roman forces deeper into a concave trap. The disciplined Libyan infantry, stationed on the flanks, pivoted inward at the critical moment, closing around the Roman troops. Simultaneously, Hannibal's cavalry, having routed the Roman horsemen on both wings, swung behind the Roman formation, completing the encirclement. The result was a textbook example of the double envelopment maneuver. The Romans, densely packed and unable to maneuver, were surrounded on all sides. Cut off from reinforcements and escape routes, they were systematically slaughtered. Hannibal's forces, working in perfect coordination, dismantled the massive Roman army despite being outnumbered. Hannibal's tactics at Cannae showcased the importance of adaptability and deception in warfare. By exploiting the overconfidence and predictability of the Roman commanders, he turned their greatest strength, their numbers, into a fatal weakness. The double envelopment remains a defining example of how superior strategy can triumph over numerical superiority. The outcome of the Battle of Cannae was nothing short of catastrophic for the Roman Republic. By the end of the engagement, Hannibal's forces had achieved one of the most decisive victories in military history. The Roman army, nearly 86,000 strong at the outset, was effectively annihilated. Estimates of Roman casualties vary, but most accounts suggest that between 50,000 and 70,000 soldiers were killed in a single day. Among the dead were one of the Roman consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, and numerous high-ranking officers, including several tribunes and senators. Another 10,000 to 15,000 soldiers were taken prisoner, leaving Rome's military and political leadership in disarray. The Carthaginian losses, by contrast, were minimal relative to the scale of their victory. Estimates placed their casualties at around 6,000 men, the majority being infantry from the center of Hannibal's formation, which bore the brunt of the initial Roman assault. Despite these losses, Hannibal retained the core strength of his army, ensuring his ability to continue campaigning in Italy. The psychological and strategic consequences of the battle were profound. The sheer scale of the defeat shocked the Roman Republic, leading to panic and a temporary collapse in morale. Several Roman allies in southern Italy, previously loyal to the Republic, defected to Hannibal, believing Rome's dominance had been broken. Cities like Capua, one of the largest in Italy, opened their gates to the Carthaginian general, further weakening Roman control over the region. Despite the magnitude of his victory, Hannibal chose not to march on Rome itself, a decision that has fueled centuries of debate among historians. Some argue that his army, though triumphant, lacked the manpower and siege equipment necessary for such an endeavor. Others suggest that Hannibal aimed to destabilize Rome through prolonged warfare rather than direct confrontation. For Rome, the defeat at Cannae forced a complete re-evaluation of its military strategy. The Republic abandoned large-scale engagements with Hannibal, adopting a more cautious and defensive approach under the leadership of Quintus Fabius Maximus, whose tactics of attrition and guerrilla warfare eventually turned the tide of the war. Yet, the shadow of Cannae loomed large over Roman military thinking, serving as both a cautionary tale and a reminder of the resilience required to recover from disaster. The aftermath of the Battle of Cannae marked one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Roman Republic. The immediate impact was devastating. Rome had lost an unprecedented number of soldiers, including a significant portion of its experienced military leadership. The Roman Senate faced a crisis of confidence, as the battle exposed the limitations of their traditional tactics and highlighted the strategic brilliance of Hannibal. The psychological effect of the defeat reverberated throughout Italy. Many Roman allies, especially in the south, defected to Hannibal, believing that the Republic's power was irreparably broken. Key cities like Capua, the second largest in Italy, pledged allegiance to Carthage. This shift not only eroded Rome's territorial control, but also posed a significant threat to its supply chains and logistical network. Despite his monumental victory, Hannibal did not march on Rome itself. This decision has been debated by historians for centuries. Some argue that his army, though triumphant, lacked the siege equipment and reinforcements necessary to besiege the well-fortified capital. Others contend that Hannibal sought to weaken Rome through a strategy of attrition, eroding its influence over time by destabilizing its alliances and occupying its territories. Rome's response to the disaster was marked by extraordinary resilience. The Senate, rather than suing for peace, redoubled its war effort. New legions were raised, even from among slaves and convicts, and the Republic adopted a strategy of avoiding direct confrontations with Hannibal's forces. This approach, championed by Quintus Fabius Maximus, relied on harassment, attrition, and the targeting of Hannibal's supply lines, earning him the moniker Cunctator, or the Delayer. In the longer term, the Battle of Cannae transformed Roman military doctrine. The emphasis shifted from brute force and frontal assaults to more flexible and adaptive tactics. The Republic also implemented reforms to rebuild its alliances, offering concessions to wavering cities and strengthening its diplomatic efforts. For Hannibal, Cannae was a high point that proved difficult to replicate. While he remained a formidable presence in Italy for several more years, the Carthaginian Senate failed to provide sufficient reinforcements, leaving him unable to capitalize fully on his victories. As Rome adapted and regained its footing, the tide of the war began to shift, culminating in Hannibal's eventual defeat at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. The legacy of Cannae endured as a symbol of both Hannibal's tactical genius and the resilience of the Roman Republic. It underscored the fragility of alliances in the ancient world and the critical importance of adaptability in the face of catastrophic loss. The aftermath of the battle laid the groundwork for Rome's eventual transformation from a regional power into the dominant force of the ancient Mediterranean. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. What areas of human evolution would you like to explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. And do not forget, subscribe to the knowledge.